Good morning, everybody. This is Diggs. It's another beautiful day out here in the Pacific Northwest, and today we're going to be talking about a new gacha game that I've been really enjoying. It's called Limbus Company. So let's go ahead and dig in. So there's a variety of reasons I've really been enjoying this game. It's definitely a little bit different compared to a lot of the gacha games on the market. It definitely feels free to play friendly. It has a PC version of the game, so you can download this from Steam. I would definitely watch out for the Steam reviews, though. If you are downloading it on Steam, you have a lot of people that are upset about how the battle pass is being advertised, and just people who aren't used to playing these types of gacha games, just really kind of posting things where they don't really understand what they're talking about. But in terms of a gacha game, it is very free to play friendly. I've been playing it for the last couple days. Actually, I wanted to get relatively far into the game before I did my review because it is a very complex game. It seems very simple on the surface. You basically have a bunch of different characters. You have 12 different characters basically, and these characters have different rarities. So you can get a character with 1-star, 2-star, or 3-star, and then along with that, they all have their special abilities that you can get as well. So the gacha element of this game, there's no equipment. It's all focused around pulling the right characters, having the right character set, and then making sure to put together a team that is going to be effective together. Because, for example, in this team right here, if I go to Liu, you'll notice that he's upgraded to tier 2. The reason he's upgraded to tier 2 is once you unlock tier 2 and once you unlock tier 3, even though he's lower rarity, he does get access to passives where even if he's not in your direct team, even if he's not actively fighting enemies for you, these passives are going to help you. Now, the game can be very confusing. If you are new to the game, if you've never played a game like this, it can be one of those games that kind of drives you up a wall, because instead of having like the standard elements, right, like fire, water, wind, ice, earth, they've completely changed it so that it's based off of the sins. So you have like pride, gluttony, all these different things, and you don't really know what the symbols mean. You don't really know what type of a character is what type of a sin. It can be very confusing. So not only is that a confusing element, but there's also a confusing element in terms of combat, which we'll get into, because combat can be very complex, and the tutorial does not explain quite a bit of the nuance of combat, which is great in the sense that you're going to feel really good once you figure out how combat is going. But it can be really frustrating because some people, if you're not doing the research, if you're not looking up information, you will quickly fall behind in your combat capacity. Now, there is basically a large chunk, I would say, of the game is going to be through exploring missions. So that's going to be coming through here. You're going to be going through all of these missions, very similar to any other gacha game. But where you get relatively unique experiences is that the game offers dungeon experiences. So at the end of every chapter, so to say, and what becomes kind of the weeklies that you get to clear once you clear chapter 3, you get access to dungeons that are very similar to any type of a roguelike dungeon crawler that you've played. I'll give you an example here. Right here, you can kind of go in with the characters. When you get to the boss dungeons, you can go in here and clear this, and you have the characters that are kind of yours, right? And you can see up here, you get a lot of the free currency for doing pulls from clearing the main story. Now, when you start doing mirror dungeons, this is where you start entering the roguelike elements of the game. And this is going to be completely independent, for the most part, on what you pull. Now, there is an element of like you can only use characters that you've pulled. So, for example, if I wanted to go in here, which we'll do, I'm going to start out by picking a relic. So depending on what I want to deal, after using a single coin skill, inflict 1 bleed and 1 defense down. Let's go with that. So we're going to go with that, and then I'm going to pick my characters. Now, I do want to pick, of course, the character that's going to be using bleed, and then I do want to pick what characters I have that are 3 stars. So I want to get my strongest characters in here as soon as possible. So I'll go ahead and pick this, and then you go through, and you can see here I have his 1 star and his 2 star. So in terms of doing the roguelike element of the game, the mirror dungeon, you do benefit from having the characters, but you get to pull so many times in this game that really you're going to have a lot of the characters by the time that you do actually get far in. Now, the ego is going to be like their special abilities. I'm going to go ahead and choose her 3 star. I haven't quite gotten to the point where I figured out if it's better to have a 2 star in certain situations, particularly for passives. That's something I'm still working on trying to figure out. So the dungeon gameplay, this is the kind of weekly content version of the dungeon gameplay. It's a very similar version to the final dungeons that you're going to be running through. There's 3 different floors. You can kind of choose the route that you want to go. And I would say this is the fun content of the game. This is the content where you are going to be spending most of your time. So whenever you enter combat, you are going to choose your team. And you'll notice over on the right side that my affinities change. Now, this is where things can get really complicated. And again, I am not fully an expert on this. But in order to kind of synergize well with your team, you need to have affinities that are similar. You also need to have affinities that are going to trigger your ego abilities for your characters. And there's no real easy way to see this information. So this is where knowledge of the game comes in. This is where being able to play the game and have fun and experience it is really important, because you are going to be struggling, I think, with the combat quite a bit. Now, if you are in my situation where, you know, you've done these types of combats before, you do have an easy way to kind of choose what attacks you're going to do here. So you can see here, for the most part, when I choose the win rate, you can see that my team's winning. Now, if you have never fought these enemies before and you're fighting human enemies, the thing you need to know is that your characters are fighting the individual units that they're fighting. You don't get to select targets. So you can't select one target and fight them down. You are going to be fighting essentially one-on-one. There is a separate type of battle combat system, particularly when we get to bosses, where you do get to select like certain body parts. They're called abnormality fights. But that is the same thing, except kind of a different spin on what this is doing. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my chain, and you can see here I have the choice of 2 abilities. I have the blue ability down below, and I have the orange ability up above here, right? You can see that both of them have keyword bleed associated with them. And you can see that one has 120%, one has 100%. So we're going to go ahead and go with the 120%. You can see that it's going to give on-hit bleed, which is going to be a little bit more. You'll also see that there's a buff chance for the attack up here. Now, if this were something where I was in a standard party, right, where I had 5 units in my party, I would also want to be looking at the other elements of the chained abilities down below, right? So this was her move. I chose this move, but coming over here, I would say, okay, I'm getting 125 here, but let's say that I had 3 greens in a row, potentially. I would want to make sure to try and chain those together. You'll notice, for example, if I went to this orange ability, grab this green ability, and then grab this orange ability, notice that the orange abilities get buffs, right? So that's going to be a key part of combat. The other key part of combat is going to be the clashing of skills. And if what I'm saying is not making sense to you, it's because it is a very complicated combat system, and there are lots of nuances. There's lots of RNG involved. And if you're someone who likes complex combat systems, if you're someone who likes to be able to min-max, grab the optimal route, and kind of work through systems where, you know, other people might not be able to, this is definitely going to be a game for you. I could do tons of videos just explaining all of the different status ailments, what the different units do, and I might just do that. Now, I had talked about how you can get bonuses from the different oranges here, right? Well, you can also potentially, if you wanted to, trigger a defensive ability. So they all have different defensive abilities. You can also, if you have the right conditions, use one of their special abilities, and that's going to be based off of the other abilities that you've used, triggering the ego ability essentially. Now, on top of all of this, some of these attacks have coin rolls associated with them. So as you level a character, you are going to get coin rolls as they attack the opponent. These coin rolls can add to your attack. They can change the result of your attack so that when you're clashing with an opponent, if you roll a 5 and your opponent rolls a 6, maybe you can use a coin to reroll and try and take them down. In addition to all of this, you do also have these meters down here. You'll see that you have their HP here, but then you also have these orbs. So that's going to basically be their psyche or their, if you're thinking about this in terms of Darkest Dungeon, right? Their sanity, right? So the sanity, if you have an increased sanity, which would register as a blue orb, would actually increase the chance of your roll being a positive effect for your unit. So you can have regular sanity and you can have non-regular sanity as well. Finally, when you are taking your turn, you do have to consider the passives that you get to work with here. So in the upper left-hand corner, depending on the units that you have set in your entire party formation, and depending on what passives you have access to, depending on the certain amount of elements that you're utilizing, right? So if I were to do 3 pride, which I can't do right now, the last coin on the last skill in the chain inflicts 3 bleed, right? So if I were able to do 3 of these oranges in the row, then I would be able to trigger that ability. So what does combat look like? Let's go ahead and do the win rate here. And you'll see there's a lot of stuff going on. You can see the coins up here on the left side of their ID. You can see that I prioritized win rate, and you can see that the opponent's morale is affected. Now, you can see that my sanity has gone up on all of my units. And one of the things you'll notice is that a 4th icon has kind of occurred down here. So all of a sudden, I have access to 4 combat abilities, right? Specifically, you'll notice my 3-star unit up here, Gregor, he has 2 actions available. So as you do progress through combat, more and more actions become available to you. They're RNG based because everything in this game is RNG based. You can be essentially screwed for the most part by RNG, but it is a way to speed up combat, and it is a way to make things go a little bit faster. So I'll go ahead and go by win rate here. We'll go ahead and kill the opponent, and that is essentially how combat goes. Now, you can't have multiple waves of combat. You can have combat where you do lose. There is a stagger system. So if you deal a certain amount of HP damage to your opponents, or you take a certain amount of HP damage, your character will be staggered until the end of the next turn. It's essentially like a win more mechanic, essentially. I would describe it. So if you're getting staggered, you may be in trouble. And there have been times where RNG has just completely screwed me. But it's a really fun game. There is a lot to do, and there is a story. You are a bus and you are going om nom nom, eating all of the people in the world, and the characters are relatively interesting, and each section or each chapter basically is about one character, and there's usually an antagonist and there's a background to the character. And while the character dialogue can get really like cheesy, because essentially you're reviving these characters. The idea is that you're kind of this special being that can rewind time and revive these characters, but then the characters will like kill each other, and they'll kill each other in like stupid ways, just to like it can be at times very juvenile humor that like you're like, okay, I'm going to the skip cutscene because like nothing interesting is happening here. But when you do get to like the dungeons, and when you get to like the actual substance of the story, it is a very powerful and provocative story. And in terms of the gacha games that have come out recently, nothing really compares to it in terms of the complexity of the combat system. The developers, I should say as well, have been handing out great compensation and great kind of new player benefits. When I say I've been playing as free to play, I legit have been playing as free to play, and I've been having a great time. So let me know if you guys have been playing this. This has been an amazing game for me, and I will catch you guys next time.